Hello guys, welcome to the Human and the Machine Crypto channel. Today we have a panel that is going to answer a lot of questions about what Web3 really is all about.
Yep, Metaverse, NFTs, DeFis, even DAOs. If you're wondering what this means for you, this episode is for you.
Don't miss it. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Okay guys, so allow me to introduce our three panelists today. With us is Gregor Arn, CEO of Verso. How are you doing, Greg?
Very well, thank you. How about yourself?
Good as usual. What about you, Machine? How are you doing, by the way?
Awesome, man. It's morning over here, bright and early. Really excited to talk about Web3.
Yeah. And we also have the head of staking strategy at Figment, Joshua Faier. How are you doing, Joshua?
Doing great. Not quite so early here in Montreal, but yeah, been looking forward to this all day.
I love that we are all over the place, man. And Kyle Rojas, you are in Colombia, and you are business development and partnerships of Edge and Node. How are you doing?
Life is good. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah? Okay, wonderful. Well, nice to have you guys here. And of course, we know that the topic of today's panel is Web3. So shall we start with the obvious question? What is Web3? Joshua, shall we start with you?
Yeah, sure thing. So what I love about this question in the first place is if you ask 100 people what Web3 is, you're going to get 101 different answers. For me, the focus about Web3 in general is all about ownership. And it's about the fractionalization of power that's happened during Web 2. So now anyone can take part in Web 3. Us as users, we own our data, we own our assets, we can leverage our assets to earn. We control our own data. And to me, that is really the game changer about Web 3. That is a stark contrast to Web 2. There's no more gatekeepers.
Okay. Kyle, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I also agree with the ownership aspect, but I think diving into a slightly deeper level, it's really kind of a new decentralized internet, and I think decentralization or decentralized internet kind of deserves an unpacking, since decentralization is a spectrum. But there's really what Web3 means to me in general is decentralized leadership and decision making. Naturally, an important aspect to make sure a well incentivized hive mind is allowed to make decisions, giving people, like all people, a voice around the world, not just a few people behind closed doors. But I'd say more important than anything is a decentralized tech stack. And right now in the Web 2 world, there's a client server relationship, which essentially means that whoever owns the tech servers where data is stored has complete control, right? So your Facebook, Instagram, AWS, and Google Cloud data are not yours, not really. They sit on centralized servers that are controlled by centralized entities, and your data can be deleted, banned, sold mostly without your permission. And Web3 changes that paradigm in a large way.
How? Just allow me to jump straight. How?
Yeah, so imagine a dictator wants to shut down a website. If somebody wants to, let's say in Canada, for instance, freeze bank accounts, if someone wants to change anything of any sort, they have the keys, they have the control, and therefore they have authoritarian power. Decentralization based on a decentralized tech stack allows open source, true free markets to kind of build in real time without gatekeeping, without shutting down. So it kind of decimates the power and decision making paradigms that we're seeing in this world. So it's truly something new for the world, and it's a really exciting time.
So it's kind of a tech revolution. I mean, it will be a social revolution in a way, but led by technology. Am I right? Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can totally second that. It's a paradigm shift from a tech perspective, but of course also from an ownership perspective. And I think in addition to that, what I'm like super excited about is this will enable entire new business models. I mean, now we had so many businesses, like let's say the classical B2B, B2C business models. This will move towards a user to user, a consumer to consumer state. And that just, that is something that's personally very exciting for me. And it's that coupled with the democratized access of where we are in the world, it's like, yeah, super pumped for what's to come with decentralization and Web3.
Looking at the world in the last couple of years and how a lot of governments have moved from democracy to more, like tyrant kind of leadership, I feel like Web3 couldn't come fast enough, right? So, but we're talking like about data protection, right? And all this decentralized stuff. But let's be honest, a lot of people don't care a lot about their freedoms because they take them for granted. And they want to know a lot more about what do they get in the economic aspect. So can we talk a bit of that? Is that okay, Machine, that we talk about how does the Web3 is going to benefit the everyday person, like in a year from now?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with something that you said, that people don't care about ownership. I think so my experience has been a little different. It totally depends where you are in the world. So yes, if you go to emerging markets, or if you go, let's say you go to the Philippines or to Indonesia, people give away their data freely. They don't care, because all these new tools in their hands today with the smartphones enabled them, it was like a big shift in their life, what happened in a very short period of time. But if you speak to people in Europe, if I speak to my parents, that's a very different story, because they have seen what can happen when power is abused. So the historical context is very important. I guess depends on who you speak to. But yes, I totally agree. Like in the big scheme of things, the majority of the younger, or the generation, the mobile first generation, to put it that way, has been quite negligent in terms of their data, and what they're providing freely. And I think that's definitely something that will change now, with the ownership, and obviously putting control and economic, as you say, economic opportunities back into their hands, right? So they can trade, sell, decide what happens to their data without losing that ownership.
Yeah, I think to put it into context with regards to economics, right? Web 1 was a couple decades where companies created content and companies profited. Web 2, for a couple decades, which is still kind of there as legacy tech, is where we created data and essentially profit generating actions, and the companies profited. And Web 3 is finally where this place where we create all this data, we own it, truly own it, and we profit if we want, right? If we want, and it's a permission system. So I think it's a very big designation from Web 1 to Web 2 and now Web 3. And of course, Web 2 is going to fight it, from governments to companies and anything else, because that's their incentive. Their incentive is to keep their power structure, keep it growing, because one, that's how they grew up, and two, that's where the incentives lie. And I truly believe incentives drive behavior.
100%. And that's a big difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is the alignment of incentives. Everyone is incentivized to act honestly. People are disincentivized through punishment generally, especially from like a staking sense, which comes mainly my background. You're basically disincentivized to act dishonestly. But what's unique there is that you don't need that middleman to make sure that you're abiding by any laws. It's all programmatically done.
I love that, man. I love that. This is a revolution. I love it.
Now it's our turn to shine, right? Yeah, the consumers. So actually, Joshua, you mentioned about staking. Look, decentralized finance. This is a big subcategory of Web3. Now, how can this, really help the average user and really get a sense of what Web3 can do for anyone?
Yeah, sure. So if you think about now, if you go to a bank and you deposit your funds, that realistically what's going to happen is that bank is going to use those funds, rehypothecate loans, etc., and they're going to benefit off the funds that you're depositing at that institution. You get a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of the interest, but realistically, it's the bank that's going to benefit from your funds. With something like using DeFi, you could be the person that actually creates those loans. You could be the one that funds those loans and receives the vast majority of the rewards. So you're talking, you can go from 0.01 or even negative interest rates at some banks around the world. Now you can earn anywhere between 10, 15% interest, depending on the coin, for doing pretty much exactly the same thing. There's other ways that you could earn through DeFi. For example, you can stake. And what staking is doing is you're basically providing the data validation for blockchains. You are earning the incentive of the new token that gets generated on a block by block basis. So by securing the network, you are earning a reward. There's other ways like basically providing liquidity to liquidity pools, where you're basically creating the active market for a token pair, and you'll receive trading fees as well as new tokens being generated. Basically means that you become the financial market, rather than relying on institutions to do that and profiting entirely themselves.
Okay, so allow me to just try to ground this as much as possible to our viewers, okay? Because I love what you're saying, right? Like the whole thing, right? Become part of the financial system, right? With your own money. But that kind of sounds like some people may need a lot of money to do that, right? Or of course you can fractionalize it. So I would like to ground this question in the next way. How the average person, let's say a person that makes $50,000 or $40,000 a year max, right? How can that person prepare to this? How could they benefit from it? Not today, but let's say a year from now. Greg.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very good point. It's, I think we are now at a point where the time is right to think about, the next level of the adoption curve, right? Where we really have products that are available to people without, let's say, the technical expertise on how to securely interact with a MetaMask, as an example. So this whole process around education, learning the hard way will go away in a way, and now we have this opportunity to simplify things for the end user. So I definitely think once we'll see more, more traditional financial tools, solutions, businesses, whatever it is, find a gateway or a connection into DeFi, into the decentralized world, we will just see an entirely different magnitude of adoption. And that's something that I think, I personally think the time is ripe for now. One thing to keep in mind, I guess like in most of the conversations I'm having, there's like two type of people, right? You have the ones that actually love this experimental phase of DeFi. Yeah, something can go wrong. Okay, it's like, it's like a casino in a way. I can make some really good money, but you can also lose it, right? But again, that's for a small group of people, but the majority in the world cannot afford to lose money. And what happens if they lose money? That word spreads, and it creates a very negative, a very negative sentiment around these new solutions and innovations, which can really help those people, and it makes people stay away. So I think we are now at this point where we really need to make things simpler and consider the consumer protection aspect in the whole journey.